At a foggy Port Angeles harbor, retired Navy SEAL Matt Callahan found a starving German shepherd beside the fish bins. He meant to feed him once and walk away, but the old dog knew a name buried in Matt's past saved his life and carried a hidden tag that could clear his dead son's honor after 7 years of silence. Cold fog sat low over Port Angeles that morning, pressing the harbor lights into pale yellow smears. The water beyond Edda's Hook looked like hammered lead, and the wind came off the Strait of Juan de Fuca with the smell of salt diesel, old rope, and fish scales. Matthew Callahan drove his old blue pickup along the waterfront with the heater coughing at his boots and a paper list folded in his shirt pocket. Coffee, marine oil, maybe bread if the store had not ruined it by calling it artisan. He was 58 years old. Tall and wide through the shoulders, with short brown-gray hair, pale blue eyes, and a nose that had been broken in a place no polite person asked about. Once men had called him Master Chief. Now most people in town called him Matt, unless they wanted something fixed, moved, hauled, or forgiven without having to say the word. He had been a Navy SEAL for more years than his knees cared to remember. The service had left him with scars on both hands, hearing that came and went with weather, and a habit of reading exits before reading menus. It had also left him with a small house outside town, a porch light he had not turned on in 7 years, and a locked wooden box on the top shelf of the hall closet. The box held the pieces of his son. Not the boy himself, never that. Just the folded flag, photographs, letters, patches, a watch with a cracked band, and the kind of official language that could bury a man without getting dirt on anyone's shoes. Ben Callahan had been 28 when he died overseas as an Army K-9 handler. That still struck Matt as strange in the quiet places of his mind. His son had chosen dogs. Matt had chosen water, steel, breath control, and command. Their last real argument had been about that. Ben had stood in the kitchen with a duffel bag at his feet, smiling too hard, explaining that a German shepherd could read danger before a screen knew what to do with it. Matt had answered with pride, wearing his voice like armor. Trust the men, trust the map. Do not build faith around an animal. Ben had looked at him for a long time, not angry, worse, sad. Then he had said, "Sometimes the dog is the only one still listening." Matt had spent 7 years trying not to hear that sentence. He pulled into the fish packing lot because the small chandlery near the pier sold the marine oil he liked, and because the coffee stand next door served coffee strong enough to threaten a man's blood pressure in writing. The lot was busy, and the gray way working harbors were busy. Forklifts beeped. Gulls screamed from the roofline. Men in orange bibs moved plastic tubs across wet concrete. A young deckhand smoked beside a stack of crab pots while pretending not to shiver. Matt parked near the back wall where a row of dented trash bins leaned under a corrugated awning. That was where he saw the dog. At first he thought it was a collapsed tarp. Then the tarp lifted its head. A German shepherd lay beside the trash, half hidden by a pile of flattened bait boxes. Its coat was sable with a black saddle, but grime had dulled the color until the animal looked made of wet ash. The muzzle was silvered with age. One ear stood torn along the edge. The other kept trying and failing to rise. Across its chest, beneath mats and dried salt, a white crescent of fur showed like a moon caught in dirty water. The right front leg rested wrong, not broken, fresh, but old pain had taught it a crooked way to exist. The dog's ribs showed when it breathed, not dramatically, just enough. Enough was plenty. Matt stood with one hand on the truck door. The dog watched him. Its eyes were amber, tired, and too deliberate for a stray that had given up. That annoyed him. Hopeless things were easier to pass. A fisherman came out of the coffee stand with a breakfast sandwich wrapped in foil. The dog's ears lifted a fraction. The man looked down, tore off a corner of biscuit, and tossed it toward the bins. It landed short, near a puddle of dirty rainwater. The shepherd struggled upright. Its front leg trembled. It took one step, then another, and reached the food with the grave care of an old soldier crossing a mined road. It sniffed the biscuit, then looked back at the man's hand. It did not snap. It did not beg. It waited. The fisherman gave an embarrassed laugh. "Sorry, buddy." He walked away. The dog lowered its head and ate the wet biscuit in 2 small bites. Matt felt something move behind his ribs. He disliked it immediately. Inside, the chandlery heat fogged the windows, and the clerk, a narrow woman named Paige with a silver braid and a voice like a pocket knife, looked up from a shipping invoice. "Morning, Callahan. Your coffee is trying to remove paint from the counter," Matt said. "That is why it costs $4. He set the marine oil down and pointed toward the back window. "Dog been out there long?" Paige followed his glance. "3rd day, maybe." "Showed up after that storm. Animal control said they are backed up. Of course they are." He bought a small bag of dog food, a bottle of water, and 2 cans of something labeled salmon dinner, which seemed like emotional blackmail in a harbor town. Paige rang him up without comment. That was one of her better qualities. At the door, she said, "You taking him?" "No." The word came too fast. Matt picked up the bag. "I am feeding him. There is a difference." Paige looked through the fogged glass at the dog, then back at him. "Sure there is." Outside, Matt crouched slowly, and both knees reported misconduct. The shepherd did not retreat. It watched his hands. Matt poured kibble onto a clean piece of cardboard and opened 1 can with the screwdriver from his pocket. The smell made him wish for combat rations, which at least had the decency to taste bad without pretending otherwise. "Go on," he said. "Eat." The dog leaned forward, then stopped. It waited. Matt's throat tightened before he could stop it. Someone had trained this animal to ask permission, even while starving. "Eat," he said again, softer. The shepherd lowered its head and began slow bite by slow bite. Every few seconds, its eyes lifted to check his face, his shoulders, the angle of his boots. "Good habit," Matt muttered. "Terrible life." He stood when the dog had finished half the food. The wind slipped under his coat. His coffee sat forgotten on the truck hood, steaming into the fog. "All right," he said. "That is the end of my involvement." The dog looked at him. "Do not do that." The dog did exactly that. Matt made it 6 steps toward the truck. Behind him came the scrape of claws against wet concrete. He turned. The shepherd had risen and taken 1 step after him. It tried another. Its injured leg buckled. The dog fell hard, shoulder striking the concrete, breath leaving in a small, ugly grunt. No cry. No dramatic howl. Just failure meeting pavement. Matt closed his eyes. He had heard men hit ground like that. The memory came without asking. Dirt. Smoke. A body folding under the full weight of wanting to live. "Damn it," he whispered. The dog's tail moved once, not a wag, a question. Matt walked back, pointing at it as if lecturing a recruit too foolish to appreciate policy. "Listen to me. This is temporary. You get dry, you get food, you get a vet, and then somebody with a sunnier personality gets involved." The shepherd blinked. Matt went to the truck bed and pulled out an old canvas sail tarp he kept for boat repairs. The dog flinched when he reached near its neck. Matt stopped at once. Under the dirty fur, he had seen a torn strip of brown harness, stiff with salt and age. "Not today," he said. "I heard you." With help from Paige, who pretended not to notice how carefully Matt lifted the dog, they eased the shepherd onto the tarp in the truck bed. The animal did not resist. It only watched Matt with those amber eyes, as if memorizing the shape of a man who had not yet decided whether he was kind. The drive home followed the coast for a while before turning inland toward the cedar trees. Fog hung between the trunks. Houses appeared and vanished like thoughts a man did not want to finish. Matt checked the rearview mirror more than the road, which would have irritated him and anyone else. The dog lay still, head low, torn ear twitching at every bump. Matt's house waited at the end of a gravel lane where salal and blackberry canes crowded the fence. The porch boards were gray. The railing needed repair. The porch light beside the door had not burned in 7 years, partly because the bulb was out, mostly because Matt had never replaced it. He backed the truck near the steps and opened the tailgate. "All right. Welcome to the most temporary arrangement in Clallam County." The shepherd lifted its head. Together with much grunting from Matt and silent judgment from the dog, they crossed the yard and reached the porch. The dog paused at the dark light fixture. Then it looked at Matt. "Do not get symbolic," Matt said. "The house is a dump." Inside, the kitchen smelled of old coffee, cedar smoke, and the closed air of a place where nobody expected company. Matt found 2 metal bowls, washed them with more force than necessary, and set water in one, food in the other. The dog stood at the threshold as if waiting for the invitation to be made official. "Come on," Matt said. The shepherd entered. It drank for a long time, then ate slowly, still watching him between bites. Matt leaned against the counter, arms folded. The sound of another living thing eating changed the room. He wished it did not. Afterward, the dog lowered itself near the back door facing the kitchen and hall. Matt studied the white crescent on its chest. Names came to him and fell away. Ranger. Duke. Scout. No. Then a name rose from a letter he had not read in years. "Atlas is stubborn," Ben had written once. "You would like him, Dad. He thinks every doorway is his personal assignment." Matt gripped the counter edge. The dog watched him. "Atlas," Matt said, barely above the hum of the refrigerator. The shepherd's head snapped up. Both ears tried to rise. The room went very quiet. Matt felt the old house shrink around him. "Coincidence," he said. The dog stared. Matt looked away first. "Fine. Atlas for now." Outside, fog pressed against the kitchen window, and somewhere beyond the trees, the harbor horn called once through the cold. Atlas lowered his head onto his paws, still facing the door. Matt stood in a kitchen that had been empty for 7 years and listened to a name he had not meant to remember, breathing on his floor. Morning came gray and wet, with rain ticking softly against the kitchen window and cedar branches dragging their fingers along the eaves. The house outside Port Angeles smelled of damp wood, old coffee, and a German shepherd who had not yet forgiven soap for existing. For the first 3 days, Atlas treated Matt Callahan's home like contested ground. He refused the folded quilt by the stove. He inspected the old wool blanket beside the couch, sneezed once, and walked away from it with quiet, professional disappointment. He ignored the dog bed Matt bought in town, even though Matt had told the clerk it was for a neighbor. Atlas chose the strip of floor between the kitchen and back door. From there, he could see the hallway, the porch, the sink window, and any man foolish enough to enter without permission. Matt noticed. He noticed because noticing had been trained into him long ago, hammered deep until it became less a skill than a second skeleton. The dog never slept fully on his side. He folded himself tight, nose on paws, ears working in his sleep. If a truck passed on the road, Atlas opened his eyes before the engine note reached the house. If a gull cried outside, his torn ear lifted. If Matt crossed the kitchen too fast, the shepherd tracked him with a gaze so steady it felt like being measured for a coffin. "Relax," Matt told him on the second morning. "Nobody is breaching the perimeter." Atlas stared. Bad wording, Matt admitted. The dog drank only after Matt stepped back. He ate the same way, slow and watchful, as if every bowl came with paperwork he had not yet reviewed. Twice, Matt found pieces of kibble pushed beneath the edge of the rug. Once, he found half a crust of toast hidden inside his boot. "You planning for winter?" Atlas blinked from the doorway. "Smart. This house runs out of supplies every time I remember vegetables are not technically ammunition." Atlas offered no visible appreciation for the joke. That was fine. Matt had not been spoiled by audiences. Still, the house changed in small ways that irritated him because small changes were harder to fight. He had to remember dog food. He had to leave the back door open long enough for Atlas to limp into the yard before dawn and inspect every fern like it might be hiding a report. He had to wash bowls. He had to say things out loud. "Do not look at my eggs. That sock has a service history. If you shed on my chair, I am billing the Department of Defense." The dog did not answer, which made the conversations easier than most Matt had endured. By the fourth morning, Atlas had begun following him from room to room. Not close, never needy. He moved with a careful distance, positioning himself near doorways and corners. Matt went to the hall closet for laundry detergent and found Atlas already there, blocking the lower stairs with his body. "Move." Atlas did not move. Matt shifted left. Atlas shifted left. Matt shifted right. The dog matched him with the solemnity of a church deacon guarding pie. "I said move." Atlas looked at Matt's chest. Only then did Matt realize his left hand was pressed against his sternum. It was not pain. Not exactly. Pressure. A dull, stubborn weight beneath the breastbone, the kind a man could dismiss if he had enough pride and poor judgment. Atlas rose and sniffed the air near Matt's hand. "Do not start." The dog's amber eyes did not soften. Matt hated being studied by a creature that did not understand useful lies. That afternoon, he drove Atlas to Squim because the Port Angeles clinic was full, because the dog's limp had worsened, and because Matt was not as heartless as he preferred people to assume. Atlas rode in the passenger footwell on an old towel, not the truck bed. The weather was 39 degrees and raining sideways. Temporary did not have to mean stupid. The clinic sat beside a feed store with mud on the sidewalk and a painted sign that showed a cheerful paw print no sick animal could possibly appreciate. Inside, the waiting room smelled of disinfectant, wet fur, and biscuits shaped like bones. A fat orange cat slept on the check-in counter with the confidence of upper management. Dr. Claire Monroe came from the back, wiping her hands on a green towel. She was 51. Lean, dark-haired, and sharp-eyed, with a silver streak at one temple and a navy scrub jacket under a waxed vest. Her face had the calm of someone who had once worked in rooms where screaming did not help. "You must be Mr. Callahan," she said. "Depends who owes money." She looked past him at Atlas. "And this is the old man who caused Paige to call me twice before breakfast." "Paige has too much free time." "Paige said you would deny needing an appointment." "Paige talks too much." Claire crouched without reaching for Atlas. "Hello, handsome." Atlas watched her hand. She waited. That waiting earned more of Matt's trust than the diplomas on the wall. It took 20 minutes to get Atlas onto the exam mat. He did not fight. That would have been simpler. He endured. He held still with the terrible patience of an animal that expected pain to be part of the contract. Claire examined his teeth, paws, hips, shoulders, neck, and the old injury in the right front leg. She spoke to him in a low voice while her hands moved with the care of tide water around stone. "This dog is not a stray in the ordinary sense," she said. Meaning somebody put expensive training into him before somebody else let him rot. Matt folded his arms. Claire lifted Atlas's lip gently. See the wear on the canines? Equipment work. Bite sleeves, tugs, maybe more advanced. Not fence chewing, not a bored farm dog. Her fingers moved through the thick fur at his neck. Old harness marks, deep ones. He wore fitted gear for a long time. Police, military, contractor, security, search and rescue. Hard to separate without records. Atlas lowered himself and placed his chin on Matt's boot. Matt looked down. Claire saw it and wisely gave the silence a little room. He trusts you, she said. He is temporary. The orange cat opened one eye from the counter. Even the cat looked unconvinced. Claire wrote on the chart. Of course. I mean it. I am sure you do. Matt frowned at her. You always this comforting? Only with men who lie badly. Atlas sighed against his boot. Traitor, Matt said. The exam ended with antibiotics, anti-inflammatory tablets, medicated wash, a feeding plan, and a bill that was smaller than Matt expected. He objected to that. Claire shrugged. Hard case fund. That fund have a name? Mine, usually. Matt held the paper bag of medications and wished gratitude came in a language less humiliating. At the door, Claire stopped him. Keep anything he had on him. Collar, harness, tag, torn strap, all of it. Why? Because nylon remembers things people erase. The sentence followed him home. That evening, Atlas allowed Matt to clean the raw places along his neck. Allowed was generous. He tolerated it with offended dignity and one deep sigh that suggested Matt had disappointed generations of working dogs. The pills went poorly. Matt hid one in chicken. Atlas ate the chicken and spat the pill onto the floor with surgical precision. Impressive, Matt said. Disrespectful, but impressive. Atlas carried one of Matt's gray wool socks from the laundry basket to his post by the back door. He did not chew it. He rested his head on it like a captured flag. That sock served 2 winters with honor. Atlas closed his eyes. Fine, keep it. But if underwear gets involved, we are holding a command review. The dog thumped his tail once. It should not have warmed anything inside Matt. A dog stealing a sock was not a resurrection. It was not forgiveness. It was not a hand reaching back from a son lost under classified language and folded flags. Still, grief had strange hinges. Sometimes a locked room opened because an old dog looked ridiculous with a sock under his chin. The days settled into a grudging rhythm. Matt woke before dawn. Atlas was already awake. Matt swallowed coffee before food. Atlas stared at him until he ate toast. Matt pretended not to notice. Atlas pretended patience was not a weapon. On the 9th night, the rain stopped and cold took its place. Frost silvered the porch rail. The strait beyond the trees breathed fog inland like smoke from a sleeping giant. Matt took his evening pills late and decided a heel of bread counted as supper if a man had survived worse. Atlas watched from the hallway. What? The dog stood. Matt felt the pressure return beneath his breastbone. It spread slowly, a fist closing under bone. He breathed through it and gripped the counter. Indigestion, he muttered. Bad bread, old body. Atlas sniffed the air, his ears flattened not in fear but concentration. He barked once, sharp, commanding. Matt flinched. Enough. Atlas barked again. The sound struck the kitchen like a dropped tool. Matt pushed away from the counter. The room tilted, steadied, then tilted again. Sweat gathered at the back of his neck, though the house was cold. Atlas moved into the hallway and blocked the path. Move. The dog did not move. Matt stepped around him and made it as far as the bedroom door before the pain grew teeth. It climbed into his shoulder. It slid down his left arm. It touched his jaw with cold fingers. Pain was information. He had told Ben that once when the boy was 8 and trying not to cry over a scraped knee. Pain was information. For once, Matt listened too late. His legs folded. He hit the floor beside the bed, one hand clawing at the rug. Atlas lunged toward him, old body suddenly full of purpose, and the last thing Matt heard clearly was the dog barking like he had been given a mission no one else could understand. The rain had stopped outside Port Angeles, but the night stayed wet and hard with frost shining on the porch boards and fog dragging through the cedars. Inside Matt Callahan's bedroom, the air smelled of cold wool dust and the bitter metal scent of fear. He lay on the floor beside the bed with one hand twisted in the rug and the other reaching toward the small table where the phone sat just beyond his fingers. His chest hurt in a way that no tough word could make smaller. It was no longer pressure. It had weight. It had teeth. It had a hand around his left shoulder and another hooked beneath his jaw. Atlas shoved his muzzle beneath Matt's wrist. Matt tried to speak. The first sound came out wrong. "Phone," he rasped. Whether Atlas understood the word or only the direction of Matt's reaching hand, he moved. The old German shepherd lurched to the bedside table and pawed at the cord. The receiver tumbled down, struck the floor, and bounced against the leg of the bed. Matt could not reach it. His fingers scraped the rug. Atlas seized Matt's sleeve in his teeth and pulled. Once. Twice. The movement dragged Matt a few inches and sent white fire through his chest. Atlas's bad front leg buckled. He made one small sound, then swallowed it as if even pain had to wait its turn. Matt's vision narrowed at the edges. "No," he whispered, but he did not know if he meant the pain, the dog, or the old darkness that had spent 7 years standing politely at the end of his hall. Atlas looked from Matt to the doorway. Then the dog ran. Not gracefully, not the clean stride of a young working animal in a training field. He ran like a broken oath, trying to keep itself. His claws struck the wood. His shoulder hit the frame. He shoved through the small dog door Matt had cut into the back storm door 2 days earlier and had not admitted was permanent. The night took him into the yard. Frost cracked under his paws. The gap in the fence waited where blackberry canes had pulled wire loose. Atlas squeezed through, tearing fur from his side, and crossed the wet grass toward the neighboring house where one yellow lamp still burned. Sheriff Linda Barrett lived there when she was not living in her patrol car. She was 60, broad-shouldered, gray-haired, and steady in the old coastal way, as if fog and trouble had both learned not to hurry her. She had served in the Coast Guard before taking the badge in Clallam County. She had known Matt for 18 years, which meant she respected him, worried about him, and had given up expecting him to answer direct questions like a civilized adult. At that hour, she sat at her kitchen table in a sweatshirt reading incident reports with one hand wrapped around cold tea. Atlas hit her back door hard enough to rattle the frame. Linda looked up. The dog struck the door again. Then he barked. Not loose barking, not fear barking. 3 sharp reports. A pause, then 3 more. Linda stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. Through the glass, she saw the shepherd ribs showing beneath a sable coat torn ear-high, one paw leaving a faint red mark on her porch. "Matt's dog," she said. Atlas barked once, turned toward Matt's house, then looked back at her. "Oh, Lord." Linda was moving before the prayer had finished being a prayer. She called dispatch, grabbed her coat, and followed Atlas across the yard with the flashlight, jumping in her hand. The dog did not wait for her exactly. He led her. He limped 3 steps, checked that she followed, then pushed through the fence gap toward the dark house. The porch light was out. It had always been out. Linda had stopped asking years ago. Tonight the darkness looked less like grief and more like a door left closed in a burning house. She found Matt on the bedroom floor with Atlas standing over him, chest heaving, eyes fixed on her with furious expectation. "Stay with me, Matt," Linda said.
He tried to open his eyes. They did not cooperate. The ambulance lights arrived in red flashes that washed the cedar trunks and made the windows pulse like a warning. Boots crossed the porch. Voices filled the hall. Someone asked about medications. Someone else said cardiac. Linda handed them the orange bottles from the kitchen counter. Atlas stood at the bedroom threshold until a paramedic tried to move him. The dog planted himself. "Easy," Linda said. "He is the reason we are here." Atlas allowed her hand on his collar. Allowed, barely. The last thing Matt saw before the oxygen mask covered his face was Atlas in the hallway, trembling on 3 good legs and watching him with the merciless attention of a creature refusing to lose another man. At Olympic Medical Center, time became white ceiling panels, monitor beeps, cold gel on skin, warm blankets, and voices speaking in professional calm. Matt drifted in and out. He heard the phrase, early myocardial infarction. He heard caught in time. He heard lucky. Lucky was an odd word for being dragged back from death by a starving dog with 1 bad leg and no respect for privacy. Near dawn, the pain dulled under medication, and the room settled into a blue quiet. Matt turned his head toward the glass wall by the nurse's station. Atlas sat outside the room. Someone had wrapped his bleeding paw. A metal bowl of water stood beside him. His head drooped, then jerked up every time Matt shifted beneath the blanket. Linda sat beside him in a plastic chair, still in her sweatshirt under her uniform jacket. Her hair stuck up on one side. She looked like a woman who had argued with sleep and won on technicalities. She saw Matt looking and raised 2 fingers. "That dog beat my door like a warrant," she called through the glass. A nurse looked at her. Linda lowered her voice without improving it much. "Nearly gave me a heart attack saving you from yours." Matt would have laughed if laughing did not feel like an ambitious medical procedure. Atlas stood when Matt lifted 1 hand. The dog came close to the glass. Amber eyes met blue. "You pulled me back," Matt whispered. The glass swallowed most of the words. Atlas tilted his head. Matt closed his eyes. For 7 years, he had believed there was no unfinished business left that needed him. Ben was gone. The official record had hardened around his son's name like bad concrete. The porch light stayed off. The wooden box stayed closed. Life had become coffee repairs, weather, and the long discipline of not asking God questions he was afraid might be answered. Then a ruined dog appeared beside a fish-packing dumpster, stole his sock, blocked his hallway, and refused to let his heart quit in the middle of the night. When Matt opened his eyes, Atlas was still there, not asking, not accusing, waiting. "What did you drag me back for?" Atlas sat on the other side of the glass, bandaged paw lifted slightly, body exhausted, eyes steady as morning over the strait. For the first time in 7 years, Matt wondered if being alive was not punishment. Maybe it was assignment. He came home 2 days later with a paper bag of medication, 3 pages of instructions, and a dislike for the word recovery that bordered on spiritual conviction. Recovery sounded cheerful. It suggested a man could climb back into himself, dust off the damage, and return to the version that existed before. Matt knew better. Some things did not recover. They adapted. They scarred. They limped and kept a wall at their back. Atlas understood limping. That was one reason Matt tolerated him. The dog was allowed into the bedroom now. Matt refused to call it progress. Atlas slept across the doorway, long body stretched just enough to prevent anyone entering or leaving without negotiating. Every morning, Matt woke to find the dog already watching him. You planning to supervise my breathing all day? Atlas thumped his tail once. Do not get proud. I am only alive because you are loud.
The dog accepted the insult with dignity. By the second morning home, Matt learned Atlas disliked the orange pill bottle. Not because of the smell, as far as Matt could tell, because Matt forgot it. Each time the bottle remained on the counter past breakfast, Atlas stood beside it and stared at the pills. Then Matt. Then the pills again, with the patience of a church lady guarding a casserole sign-up sheet. I see it. Atlas stared. I said I see it. Atlas continued. Fine. Only after Matt swallowed the pill did the dog return to the doorway. It was inconvenient being cared for by something that could not be shamed into giving up. On Thursday afternoon, Rachel Evans arrived in a maroon Subaru with a Veterans Services sticker on the back window and a canvas tote bag so full of folders it looked ready to testify. She knocked like a woman who had been ignored by better men and had saved receipts. Matt opened the door halfway. You selling salvation or insurance? Rachel was 46, compact and steady, with brown hair pulled into a low knot and dark eyes that missed nothing useful. She wore a navy rain jacket over a burgundy sweater, and a badge hung from a lanyard around her neck. Neither. Veterans support. Your discharge nurse sent a referral. I did not ask for one. You had a heart attack. People rarely complete forms during those. Atlas appeared at Matt's side. Rachel looked down at him and her face softened without turning sentimental. And you must be the reason he is still rude in person. Atlas sniffed her hand. Matt said he does not like strangers. Atlas licked Rachel's knuckles once. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Apparently he has standards. Against his better judgment, Matt opened the door wider. Rachel came in and did not comment on the dust along the windowsill, the unopened mail near the microwave, or the way the living room furniture seemed arranged to avoid looking at the hall closet. That restraint bought her 5 minutes. She used them efficiently. Blood pressure cuff, medication chart, food schedule. A yellow note on the refrigerator that read, "Coffee is not breakfast." Matt stared at it. This is vandalism. This is healthcare. Atlas sat beside Rachel while she worked, watching Matt more than her. Rachel noticed. He is tracking you. He tracks everybody. No, Rachel said, not like this. When your breathing changed, he stood. When your hand moved to your chest, he shifted closer. When you pretended nothing happened, he looked irritated. He's not alone. Matt looked at Atlas. The dog sat with his tail curled around his paws, the white crescent on his chest catching the gray window light. He was trained, Matt said. It was the first time he had said it without making the words sound like accusation. Rachel's pen stopped. Military? Maybe. Claire thinks so. Rachel made a note in her book. Do you have anything he was wearing when you found him? Harness collar tag. Torn harness piece. Claire took it for cleaning. Ask her to keep it. Why? Because gear keeps history after people edit paperwork. Matt did not answer. The sentence stayed in the house after Rachel left. That evening, Atlas refused to eat until Matt ate first. Not dramatically, he simply sat beside his bowl and stared at the soup untouched on the stove. Matt tried ignoring him. Atlas won. You were easier starving beside a dumpster. Atlas did not blink. Matt ate half a bowl. Only then did Atlas lower his head to his food. It was manipulation. Matt respected it. 2 days later, Claire arrived near sunset in a mud-splashed clinic truck carrying a sealed plastic bin. The sky had turned pewter over the cedars. Atlas was across the room before Claire set the bin on the kitchen floor. His body went still. His ears lifted. Inside lay the old harness, cleaned but still ragged brown nylon sun faded to the color of dead leaves. One buckle did not match.
The chest strap had been patched with black thread. The lining bore a square of uneven stitching done by hand.
Matt crouched beside it. Atlas moved between him and the bin, not aggressive, afraid. "Easy," Matt said. The dog held the strap gently in his mouth and pulled it back. Claire watched from the doorway. "That is not possession," she said. "That is grief." Matt hated the word in his kitchen. He looked at the ugly square of stitching. Then he looked at Atlas, whose amber eyes were fixed on the harness as if something holy had been placed on the floor. Matt reached for his pocket knife. Atlas rose to his elbows. "Stay," Matt said, and the command slipped out soft and automatic. Atlas stayed. Threads snapped one at a time beneath the blade. Matt peeled back the lining and felt metal hidden inside. He pulled out a small broken tag, dull, scratched, and worn smooth along one edge. Under the kitchen light, 4 characters remained clear. ATL-09. Beneath them, half buried under scratches, was part of another word. Call. Matt stopped breathing. The room. The rain. Claire. Rachel's notes on the refrigerator, all of it, drew away. He saw a letter in Ben's handwriting. "Atlas is stubborn, Dad. You would like him. He sleeps across the door like an old man with clearance." The dog had not been named by accident. Matt looked down at the German Shepherd. Atlas sat very still, eyes on the tag, as if a piece of his own soul had been returned from mud. Matt's voice came out thin. "It is Ben's dog." Rain came back before midnight, soft at first, then steady enough to blur the black windows of Matt Callahan's kitchen. The old house outside Port Angeles held the sound in its roof and walls, as if the cedars had leaned close to listen. Matt sat at the kitchen table with the broken tag in his palm. ATL-09. Call. 4 letters and 2 numbers had turned the room into a place where the past could breathe. Atlas lay beside the table, his scarred head resting on Ben's old harness, one paw touching the frayed chest strap. He had not slept. Neither had Matt. Claire Monroe stood near the sink with her arms folded, letting silence do what lectures could not. She had stayed after finding the tag because doctors, good ones, knew when a wound had opened too deep to leave unattended. Matt kept looking at the metal fragment as if it might change. It did not. His son had written about Atlas. His son had trusted Atlas. His son had died under a report that used soft words to suggest hard blame. Now the dog from those old letters was in Matt's kitchen, old, hungry, limping, and alive. Claire finally spoke. "You need to sit somewhere with a back." "I am sitting. You are bracing. There is a difference." Matt looked up. "You always diagnose furniture. Posture. Only when men with recent cardiac events turn gray in my clinic district." Atlas lifted his head at the word cardiac. Matt saw it and lowered the tag to the table. "I am fine." Atlas stood. Claire looked at the dog, then at Matt. "You are losing the room." That was unfair because it was true. Matt pushed back from the table and gripped the chair until the dizziness passed. He hated the body for telling on him. He hated the dog for noticing. Mostly he hated that Ben's name had come back through a piece of metal sewn into a thing left to rot. Claire tapped the tag with one finger. "We document this. Photos first. No guessing in writing. No big claims before facts can carry them." Matt gave a short laugh without humor. "You sound like Rachel." "Rachel sounds useful. She is bossy." "That too." Claire photographed the tag beside a ruler, then the harness, the stitched lining, the torn buckle, and the worn places along the straps. Atlas watched every movement.
When Claire lifted the harness too high, he rose. Not a growl, not a threat, a warning made of posture. She lowered it. "Sorry, old man." Atlas sat again, but his amber eyes never left the gear. Matt stared at the white crescent on the dog's chest. He remembered a picture Ben had once mailed from training. He had not looked at it carefully then. The dog had been young in that photo, proud black saddle shining in dust, white mark bright against his chest. Matt had set the picture aside because the smile on Ben's face had annoyed him. Not the smile itself, the joy behind it. Ben had looked fully alive beside that dog. Matt had mistaken that joy for defiance. Now the mistake sat in his kitchen, breathing through a gray muzzle. "I have photographs," Matt said.
Claire waited. Of Ben, maybe of the dog. Then get them. He did not move. The hall closet waited outside the kitchen like a sealed room in a shipwreck. Matt had opened it for coats, boots, fuses, and towels. He had not opened the wooden box on the top shelf in years. The box had become a country with closed borders. Atlas rose slowly and came beside him. The shepherd did not push. He did not bark. He simply stood near Matt's knee, warm and steady. That was worse. Force could be resisted. Patience asked a man to become honest. Matt stood. The hallway felt longer than usual. Rain worked at the roof. Claire followed at a distance that respected both grief and heart medication. The wooden box sat above the winter coats where dust had gathered along the lid. Ben had made it in high school, out of cedar, proud of his hidden joints and uneven varnish. Matt had told him the corners were rough. Ben had said rough things lasted if you treated them right. Matt lifted the box down. It was heavier than cedar had any right to be. At the kitchen table, he opened it. The smell came first. Old cloth, paper, a trace of leather. Something faintly sun-warmed, though the box had seen no sun in 7 years. Inside were folded uniform pieces, gloves, dog tags, a unit patch, letters bound with a rubber band, and photographs he had not allowed himself to study. Matt's hand hovered over the first picture. Ben, at 17, with a fishing rod and a grin too big for his face. Ben at 21, in uniform, trying to look serious and failing. Ben at 28, kneeling beside a German shepherd with a sable coat, black saddle torn left ear, and a white crescent on his chest. Matt sat down hard. Claire said nothing. Atlas moved forward. He sniffed the photograph, then lowered his muzzle onto Ben's old gloves inside the box. No trick. No how. No miracle fit for cheap television. Just an old dog resting his face on the scent of the man who had once been his world. Matt pressed the heel of his hand against his eyes. The sound that left him was small and rough and almost angry. Grief had found a crack he had spent years sealing with discipline. It did not ask permission. Claire turned toward the sink, giving him the mercy of not being watched. Atlas stayed with his muzzle on the gloves. When Matt could speak, his voice sounded as if it belonged to someone older. "He knew me." Claire turned back. "Who, Atlas?" "He knew me before I knew him." "Maybe." Matt picked up the photo. Ben's hand rested on the dog's neck. The dog leaned into him with the complete trust of a creature who had been given both work and love. Matt remembered the final official visit after Ben died. 2 men in clean uniforms, 1 civilian in a dark coat, phrases like complex, environment handler decision route, delay, canine response not fully controlled. No accusation sharp enough to fight, no truth solid enough to hold. Only fog. Fog could bury a man as thoroughly as soil. Rachel arrived the next morning with coffee she refused to let Matt drink until he ate a biscuit.
Atlas supported her policy by sitting in front of the mug. Matt called them both traitors. Neither looked troubled. Rachel studied the photographs, Claire's notes, the tag, and the harness pictures. Her expression tightened, but she did not perform outrage. That would have been easier. She began making lists. Microchip scan, veterinary affidavit, transfer records, military working dog retirement logs, FOIA request, contract timelines, Ben's letters. Matt frowned. "You are building a courthouse on my kitchen table." "No, I am building a ladder." "Into what?" "Into paperwork." "That might be worse." Rachel allowed herself half a smile. Paperwork is where many lies go when they think nobody grieving has the strength to read. Matt looked at Atlas. The dog had resumed his place across the doorway, but his eyes remained fixed on the cedar box. What if it proves the report was right? Rachel's pen stopped.
It might not. What if it does? The rain outside softened, and the house seemed to lean inward. Matt's voice nearly failed. "I do not know how to bury him twice." Rachel did not rush to comfort him. That was one of her gifts. "Maybe we are not digging him up," she said. "Maybe we are finding where they buried the truth beside him." Matt closed his hand around the broken tag. The metal bit into his palm. "Look," he said. Rachel nodded. "I will look." Claire took Atlas back to the clinic for another microchip scan that afternoon. Matt insisted on driving, which both women disliked, and Atlas resolved by planting himself in the passenger seat until everyone accepted the arrangement. At the clinic, the orange cat watched the proceedings from a printer tray like a bored admiral. Claire passed the scanner slowly over Atlas's shoulders. The reader beeped, stuttered, then flashed partial data. She did it again. Same result. Manufacturer code, service-linked entry, blank ownership field, later civilian registry incomplete. Claire's jaw set. "Computers do stupid things," she said. "People do mean things. Which is this? This smells like people." Rachel photographed the screen and wrote down the partial code. Atlas stood still, but his eyes found Matt. There was no way to know what the dog remembered. Scent, voices, impact, a command shouted through dust. Maybe only hunger and kindness. Maybe everything. Matt placed one hand lightly on the scarred head. Atlas leaned into him. That night, Matt placed Ben's photograph on the kitchen shelf instead of returning it to the box. The house changed when he did it. Not healed, no. Healing was not that polite. But the photograph made the silence less like a locked door. Atlas sat below the shelf and looked up for a long time. Matt stood beside him. The porch light outside remained dark. The rain stopped. For a moment, the strait beyond the trees was quiet enough that Matt could hear Atlas breathing. Then Rachel called. Her voice was alert, careful, and too controlled. "I found a name in the public contract records." Matt looked at Ben's photograph. "North Star Tactical Analytics." Rachel paused. "And Matt, I found a phrase tied to canine reassessment that you need to hear sitting down." "What phrase?" "Non-adoptable behavioral transfer." Atlas lifted his head before Matt moved. Matt's hand closed around the phone until his knuckles whitened. The house seemed to darken around the words. The next morning rose in a pale wash of rain over Port Angeles, with gulls crying above the harbor and fog snagging itself in the rigging of moored boats. Inside Matt Callahan's kitchen, the table had become a battlefield made of paper coffee rings, pill bottles, and one German shepherd who refused to let anyone forget breakfast. Rachel Evans arrived early with 3 folders, a portable scanner, and the manner of a woman who trusted dates more than declarations. She wore a navy rain jacket, damp at the shoulders, and carried a grocery bag in her free hand. Matt looked at the bag. "If that is kale, I am calling law enforcement."
Sheriff Linda Barrett is already annoyed with you, Rachel said. Do not give her paperwork. Atlas sniffed the bag and sat. Rachel smiled faintly. Oatmeal, eggs, and apples. Atlas looked at Matt as if the matter had been settled by committee. The betrayal is expanding, Matt said.
Rachel taped a new medication sheet to the refrigerator beside the one that said coffee is not breakfast. This one said eat before arguing. Matt read it. You people are vandalizing my home in stages. We call it care planning. That sounds worse. Care often does.
Rachel did not waste time after that. She spread documents across the table and began with what could be touched. Claire's veterinary report described Atlas as underweight, medically neglected, older but disciplined, showing harness wear, bite equipment wear, and responses consistent with advanced working dog training. The microchip scan showed a manufacturer code, a service-linked entry that would not fully display, and a later civilian registry missing handler and transfer fields. The broken tag fragment showed ATL-09 and part of call. Ben's photograph showed the same dog, younger, stronger, with the same white crescent on his chest and the same torn left ear.
Matt listened while Atlas lay beneath the table with his head on Matt's boot. The dog had learned that this position stopped Matt from standing too fast. It was practical. It was also rude. Rachel continued. North Star Tactical Analytics appears in public procurement records tied to sensor packages, field route assessment, and post-deployment equipment recovery. Equipment, Matt said. Dogs are not equipment. On paper, Rachel said, too many living things become categories. Matt's jaw tightened. She slid another page forward. There is also a reference to canine reassessment support through a contractor chain. The wording is vague. Vague words usually know what they are hiding. Rachel nodded. That is my experience. She called Mark Reynolds in Seattle on speaker because Mark had asked to hear Matt's voice before deciding how much trouble he was volunteering to carry. Mark was a veteran's legal aid attorney, a former JAG, and a man whose calm sounded less like comfort than a locked cabinet. Mr. Callahan, he said a tag fragment is a door, not a verdict.
Matt looked at the broken metal on the table.
I did not ask for poetry. Good. Legal work ruins poetry.
Rachel covered her mouth with one hand. Mark went on. The dog may be Atlas. The photograph strongly supports that. The chip trail raises questions. The contract references raise more questions. But to challenge an official narrative, we need layers. Witnesses, records, contradictions, contemporaneous notes. Anything Ben wrote before the mission, anything someone else kept after. Matt heard the careful cruelty of truth in that. The dog could not prove everything by surviving. Love could open the door. Evidence had to walk through it. Mark asked for copies of everything and warned them not to accuse North Star publicly without a foundation. Do not poke a contractor with money unless you have more than grief in your hand, he said. Matt stared at the phone. You always this inspiring? Only before lunch, after the call.
Rachel insisted Matt leave the house. You need food that did not come from a can. Food comes from cans for a reason. Yes, war and sadness. Matt looked down at Atlas. You hearing this? Atlas stood, which Rachel accepted as a vote. They drove into town under a sky the color of wet pewter. Olympic Diner sat near the waterfront, warm with steam on the windows and the smell of bacon, coffee, and raincoats hung too close to the heater. The bell over the door gave a tired jingle when Matt entered with Atlas at his side. Conversation thinned, not stopped. That would have been too honest. It thinned the way fog thinned when headlights passed through it. Matt felt the looks. Old SEAL. Dead son. Found dog. Maybe the son's dog. Maybe a lawsuit. Maybe trouble. He preferred bullets to whispers. Bullets admitted their purpose. At the counter, Nora Finch, the diner owner, pointed a coffee pot at him like a courtroom exhibit. Matt Callahan, if you came to order black coffee and glare at it, I am charging rent. Eggs, Matt said. Medical miracle. Do not start. Too late. She looked down at Atlas. And for the handsome veteran, he is not eating diner food. Atlas sat with perfect posture. Nora leaned over the counter. Sweetheart, blink twice if the man is starving you with responsible portions. Atlas blinked once. Matt narrowed his eyes. Do not learn from her. The dog slid under Matt's booth and lay facing the door. Nora brought eggs, toast, and a biscuit Matt had not ordered. Charity. For the dog. He is not getting it. Then I will eat it, and we will all feel worse. Matt took the booth with his back to the wall. Two men near the window whispered behind their mugs. He caught only pieces. Ben. Dog. Report. Blame. His hand tightened around the fork. Under the table, Atlas pushed his muzzle against Matt's knee. Not hard. Enough. Matt looked down. The shepherd's eyes lifted to his. There were things a man could do in a diner that felt good for 3 seconds and ruined a year. Matt let the fork go. The front door opened, and Sheriff Linda Barrett came in, rain on her hat and fatigue in the set of her shoulders. She scanned the room, once saw Matt, saw the men whispering, and walked to his booth. Mind if I sit? You already are. Linda lowered herself across from him. Nora brought coffee without being asked. Try not to make each other worse, Nora said. No promises, Linda replied. For a few minutes they ate in the companionable silence of people who had both seen enough weather to stop narrating it. Then Linda set down her cup. You sure you want to do this? Matt did not look up. Eat eggs? Dig, she said. Ben, Atlas, contractors, old reports. Atlas lifted his head beneath the table. Matt looked out the window where rain striped the glass. You telling me to leave my son under a lie? I am telling you I do not want to find you dead under the truth. The words landed harder because there was no accusation in them. Linda rubbed her thumb along the edge of her mug. I remember what you looked like after the funeral. You were not living. You were just too stubborn to stop breathing. Matt said nothing. Atlas pressed against his leg again. Linda looked down at the dog. Now this old fellow shows up and I see a spark. Sparks can light a room. They can burn one down, too. Matt almost smiled. You giving sermons now, only to men who ignore advice unless it arrives wearing fur. He snorted despite himself. When Linda left, she paused beside the booth. If trouble comes to town in a suit, call me before you punch it. I do not punch suits. Since when? Since my cardiologist got bossy. Linda's laugh was brief, but the worry stayed. Back at the house, Rachel had new information waiting in her inbox. She read it twice before speaking. Matt stood by the window with Atlas at his side. The rain had eased. Water dripped from the cedar branches like the woods were thinking. Rachel said there may be a witness. Matt turned. Who? Peter Lowell. The name meant nothing at first. Rachel looked toward Claire, who had arrived while Matt was out, and now stood near the stove with both hands around a mug. Claire's face had changed. Not surprised. Hurt. Matt noticed. You know him. Claire set the mug down. He is my brother. The kitchen went still. Rachel spoke carefully. Records place him with the mission support element during Ben's final operation. He was medically discharged the next year. Current address near Forks. Claire looked at Atlas, then away. Peter never talked about it. To you? To anyone? Matt's voice dropped. He knew my son. Claire closed her eyes for a second. Yes. And he never came to my house. No. The word came from Claire like it had lived in her throat for years.
Atlas stood, sensing the change in Matt's breathing. Rachel lifted one hand. "We do not assume. He may know nothing useful. He may be afraid. He may be broken." Matt reached for his jacket. Claire stepped in front of him. "Not tonight. Move." "No."
Her voice did not rise. That made it harder to dismiss. "You just survived a heart attack. You are angry enough to make poor choices, and my brother is not a clean answer waiting in a trailer." Matt stared at her. Claire did not move. Atlas placed himself between them, head low, not choosing sides so much as choosing survival. Rachel said tomorrow. "We call Linda. We tell Mark. We go with a plan." Matt looked at the broken tag on the table. Plans had failed Ben. Screens had failed Ben. Polite men had buried Ben beneath words that did not bleed. Then Atlas touched his muzzle to Matt's hand. Warm. Steady. Alive. Matt let out one breath. "Tomorrow," he said. Claire looked toward the dark window. "Tomorrow, then." Outside, the fog rose from the strait and moved through Port Angeles like something searching for a name it had almost forgotten. Rain came down hard over Forks, Washington, turning the roadside ditches silver and the dark firs into walls of dripping shadow. The highway behind Matt Callahan's pickup shone black in the headlights, and every passing log truck shook water from the air like a warning. Atlas sat in the passenger footwell on a folded blanket, his sable coat brushed but still rough, his white chest crescent visible each time lightning brightened the windshield. The dog had been silent since Port Angeles, not sleeping, not resting, watching. His ears changed before each curve, before each slowing truck, before each road sign that pulled them closer to Peter Lowell's address. Matt noticed because Atlas had trained him to notice back. The irony would have amused him if his stomach had not been full of cold iron. Claire Monroe sat behind him in the cab, arms crossed, raincoat zipped to her throat. She had insisted on coming. Matt had objected. Rachel had supported Claire with the serene cruelty of common sense. Sheriff Linda Barrett knew where they were going because Rachel had texted her the address, the time, and a warning that Matt looked like a man who might confuse interview technique with a door breach. Matt called that excessive. Nobody agreed. Peter Lowell's trailer sat at the far end of a muddy lane outside Forks, half hidden beneath a leaning hemlock and a blue tarp that sagged over the roof. A faded pickup rested in the weeds with one low tire. Wind chimes made from old keys clicked softly under the porch awning. The place smelled of wet moss, wood smoke, and the kind of loneliness that had stopped expecting visitors. Matt cut the engine. Atlas did not move, his eyes fixed on the trailer door. "You know this place?" The dog gave no answer. He did not need one. Claire leaned forward. "Matt, what?" "Let me talk first if he opens the door." Matt looked in the mirror at her face. For the first time since he had met her, Claire did not look sharp. She looked younger and older at once. "He is your brother," Matt said. Yes, that seemed to explain everything and nothing. They stepped into the rain. Atlas landed carefully, favoring his right front leg. The dog did not shake water from his coat. He stood head high, staring at the trailer door as if the past had a scent and it was leaking through the cracks. Claire climbed the porch steps first. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. From inside came the sound of something falling, then slow footsteps. A chain scraped. The door opened only a hand's width. Peter Lowell looked older than 49. His blonde hair had gone gray at the temples and lay flattened beneath a knit cap. His face was thin, his beard uneven, his eyes pale blue and bloodshot. A hearing aid sat behind his right ear. He looked first at Claire, and some old shame moved across his face. Then he saw Matt.
Then he saw Atlas. The color left him so quickly that Matt thought he might fall.
Peter opened the door fully and stepped back, one hand gripping the frame. "No," he whispered. Atlas stood in the rain. He did not growl. He did not wag. He only watched Peter with the stillness of a working dog searching a room. Peter covered his mouth with one shaking hand. "No." Claire's voice was tight. "Peter." He looked at her as if he had forgotten she was there. "I thought he was dead." Matt's hands closed once, then opened. "Who?" Peter stared at Atlas. "Him." The word broke. "I thought they put him down after the review. I thought Ben got him out, and then they both just—" He could not finish. Matt stepped forward. Claire caught his sleeve. Not hard. Enough. Peter sank onto the threshold. Rain blew across his knees. Atlas took one limping step toward him. Peter flinched, then bowed his head. "I am sorry," he said. Matt heard the apology and felt anger rise like black water. For 7 years, Matt had eaten alone beneath a dead porch light while men who knew pieces of the truth breathed somewhere else. For 7 years, Ben's name had sat under a fog of careful blame. For 7 years, this man had known the dog might matter and had said nothing. Matt wanted to hate him cleanly. Clean hatred was easier to carry. Atlas moved closer to Matt's leg, warm and wet against his boot. Not stopping him, reminding him. "Inside," Matt said. Peter nodded like a man obeying a sentence. The trailer smelled of damp carpet, old coffee, cigarette smoke, and sleep that had not done its job. A television murmured without viewers. 3 military photographs sat face down on a shelf. A line of prescription bottles crowded the small table beside a recliner. An ashtray held coins instead of ash. Peter saw Matt looking at the photographs. "I keep them face down because some days they look back." Matt said nothing. Claire stood near the kitchenette, arms wrapped around herself. She had not hugged her brother. He had not asked. Atlas lowered himself near the door facing the room. Matt placed the broken tag fragment on the table. "Where did this come from?" Peter looked at it and closed his eyes. "Inside his harness." "Who put it there?" Peter's jaw worked. Matt leaned forward. "Do not make me ask twice." Atlas's ears lifted at the change in his voice. Peter opened his eyes. "I did." The room went very still. Claire whispered his name. Peter shook his head, not at her. At the years. "Not right away. Later. After they moved him stateside. I saw him at a transfer kennel outside Tacoma. He was thin then, not like this, but wrong. Like something had been taken out of him." Matt's voice came low. "You knew he was Ben's dog?" "Yes. They told me he had failed reassessment, unstable, aggression risk, non-adoptable. Was it true?" "No." The word came fast and raw. Peter looked at Atlas. He was grieving. "There is a difference." Claire turned away, pressing her fingers to her mouth. Outside rain hammered the trailer roof. Matt sat in the straight chair because his legs had begun to feel unreliable. "Tell me about Ben." Peter stared at the floor. He looked like a man who had been waiting 7 years for punishment and had become afraid it would never arrive. "It was a night movement," he said. "Dry country, bad ridgeline. A wash running through it like a cracked bone. We had North Star overlays on the route, pressure indicators, ground risk, all the expensive bright magic." He laughed once without humor. "The map said green."
Matt knew that tone. Green meant safe. Green meant keep moving. Green meant some man in a clean shirt would later swear the screen had done its duty. Peter swallowed. Atlas did not buy it. He kept pulling left. Not panic, not disobedience. That little trained resistance handlers know. Ben called it in twice. Command told us the window was closing. The route read clear. Claire spoke from the kitchenette. "Peter?" He looked at her and his face folded.
"I should have told you." "Yes," she said. The word cut because it was true. Peter rubbed both hands over his face. Ben stopped us anyway. He put one hand down and told Atlas to hold. That dog froze. I remember thinking he knew something before any of us did. Then contact came from the slope. First burst took Monroe in the thigh. Another guy's sights went down hard behind a rock. Somebody yelled to push through the wash because the overlay was still green. Ben screamed no, not shouted, screamed. He said Atlas had found a pressure line. Matt could almost see it now, though he had spent years refusing to imagine his son's last minutes beyond the official poison. Dust. Night vision green. A dog pulling against a lead. A young handler trusting what breathed beside him over what glowed on a screen. What happened? Peter's hearing aid gave a faint whine. He adjusted it with shaking fingers. Sykes almost stepped into it. Ben tackled him sideways. The first device went off to the right. Close enough to throw us far enough that we lived. Because Ben stopped us. The words entered Matt slowly. Because Ben stopped us. For 7 years, the report had suggested hesitation, confusion, a canine response not controlled. Peter was saying the delay had saved lives. Peter reached toward the small table and opened a dented metal tin. Inside lay folded notes, a scorched challenge coin, and a small black audio recorder wrapped in cloth. "I kept this." Matt stared at it. Peter's hand trembled. "Personal comm backup. Damaged. Most of it is noise. I kept it because I was too much of a coward to use it." Claire's face tightened. "Peter, why?" He looked at his sister with tears already standing in his eyes. "They came while I was in the hospital. Review people. Contractor liaison. A uniform I never got a name for. They said the mission was sensitive. They said Ben's decision complicated the report. They said if I made noise, benefits could get tangled, families could be hurt. My discharge could be reviewed." Matt's voice was almost soundless. "And you believed them?" Peter nodded. "I was half deaf, doped up, scared, and alive because your son was dead. That is not an excuse. No, it is not." Atlas rose and walked to Peter. Matt's body tightened. The dog lowered his head onto Peter's boot. Peter broke. Not loudly, no theatrical sobbing. He folded over one hand, the other hovering above Atlas's scarred head as if he had no right to touch mercy. Atlas allowed it. That undid Matt more than the confession. The dog had been mislabeled, abandoned, and left beside trash. Yet here he was, offering stillness to one of the men who had failed to protect the truth. Matt stood slowly. "We take this to Rachel and Mark." Peter nodded. "I will say it on record, whatever it costs." Matt looked at him. "You do not know what it costs yet." Peter accepted that. When they left the trailer, the rain had softened to mist. Claire stayed behind for a moment on the porch with Peter. Matt did not hear what she said. He saw only Peter nodding, crying, without covering his face now, and Claire standing close enough to be a sister, though not close enough to forgive everything. Atlas climbed into the truck with a tired grunt. Matt set the audio recorder on the seat. "You led them back," he said. Atlas rested his muzzle on his paws.
You tried to go back for him. The dog's eyes lifted. Matt had spent 7 years imagining Ben's final act as a question mark wrapped in shame. Now another shape stood before him, terrible and bright. Ben had not trusted the dog too much. He had trusted Atlas enough to save men when he could not save himself. Matt started the engine. The wipers moved mist from the windshield, one slow sweep at a time. Ahead, the wet road curved back toward Port Angeles, and behind him, a man who had lived inside a lie finally left his door open to the rain.
The road back to Port Angeles ran black under the headlights, with mist crawling low across the asphalt and the dark Olympic forest pressing close on both sides. Matt Callahan drove with both hands on the wheel, while Atlas slept in the passenger footwell for the first time since they had left Forks. The old German shepherd did not sleep deeply. His paws twitched once. His torn ear moved at sounds Matt could not hear. Still, his eyes closed, and that small surrender felt heavier than words. The scorched audio recorder sat on the center console wrapped in cloth. Peter Lowell's notes lay in a folder on Claire's lap in the back seat. Claire had not spoken for 20 minutes. Matt did not ask why. Some silences were grief. Some were anger. Some were two people standing at opposite ends of a bridge and trying to remember who burned it. Rain gathered on the windshield and vanished beneath the wipers. Matt could still see Peter in the trailer, bent over Atlas, one hand hovering as if forgiveness might bite. He wanted to despise the man. He had earned at least part of that, but Atlas had placed his head on Peter's boot. That fact sat in Matt's chest like a stone warmed by fire. Back at the house, Rachel Evans was waiting in the kitchen with her tote bag Mark Reynolds on speaker and a patience that looked suspiciously like command. Sheriff Linda Barrett sat near the stove, hat on her knee because Rachel had called her too. Matt disliked the number of people in his kitchen. Atlas liked it less, but he took position between the table and hallway and watched everyone with exhausted authority. Peter arrived 30 minutes later in Claire's truck. He looked smaller in Matt's doorway than he had in the trailer, wearing a borrowed raincoat and carrying the metal tin with both hands. Claire stood beside him but did not touch him. Not yet. Rachel began the way she did everything, with names, dates, and a blank page waiting to be filled. No speeches, she said. No guesses. No protecting anyone with vague language. Mark's voice came through the phone. If Mr. Lowell is willing, we need a recorded statement and a written account. Peter looked at Matt. I am willing. Matt did not answer. Atlas looked at him, then at Peter, as if supervising the moral weather in the room. Peter sat at the kitchen table and began again, slower this time. The mission had been in dry hill country, far from the sea, where wind carried dust instead of salt, and the ground sounded hollow in places if a man knew how to listen. The team had entered at night under a thin moon. North Star's sensor package had produced route overlays, pressure risk indicators, and a green corridor that Command wanted them to use before the window closed. Peter had been an Army medic attached to the element, carrying more bandages than hope, and joking too loudly because fear disliked quiet. Ben Callahan moved ahead with Atlas on a short lead. Peter described Ben's face when Atlas first resisted the route. Not scared. Focused. The dog's body went low, shoulder angled left, nose working the air above the dirt rather than the dirt itself. Ben stopped. He gave Atlas a hand signal, waited, then radioed that the dog had found something wrong with the marked line. Command told them the overlay was clear. The first reply was calm. The second carried impatience. Window closing, continue movement. Peter looked at Matt as he said it. Ben did not argue like a hothead. He reported like a professional. He said the dog was giving a trained pressure response. He requested a route adjustment. Denied. Matt could feel every muscle in his jaw. Atlas had lifted his head.
The dog was no longer asleep. Peter continued. They moved again because teams move when told, but Ben shortened the line and kept Atlas close. The dog pulled left. Harder. Not wild, not confused. Insistent. Peter said he remembered Ben touching Atlas's head once, not petting him, just grounding him. Then contact came from the ridge. Rounds cracked into stone, dust opened in the dark like breath from the ground. Sykes went down behind a rock with blood black on his sleeve. Another man, Monroe, caught metal in his thigh and began cursing with the practical bitterness of someone who did not want to die embarrassed. Somebody shouted to push through the dry wash. The screen still said green. Atlas dug in. Ben shouted no. Peter's voice thinned. That shout is one of the sounds I still have. The room held still. Atlas rose and came beside the table. Peter did not reach for him. He had learned something. He waited. The dog placed himself between Peter and Matt, not choosing, only bearing witness. Peter said Sykes almost stepped onto the pressure line. Ben hit him from the side and drove him down behind broken stone. The first device detonated off to the right, not under the team, because Atlas had stopped them short of the kill path.
The blast threw Peter hard enough to tear hearing from one side of his world. For several minutes after that, memory came in fragments. Green light from a cracked display, the taste of dust. Ben on one knee with one hand in Atlas's collar. Atlas pulling back toward the only path that did not smell wrong. Peter tried to move toward Monroe and fell. Ben saw it. He unclipped the short lead and gave Atlas a command. Peter's hands shook on the table. He said back, "Then take them back." The word "them" carried the whole weight of it. Atlas turned away from Ben because Ben told him to. Every instinct in the dog fought the command. Peter had seen it in the body, in the shoulders, in the refusal that lasted one heartbeat too long. Then duty won. Atlas ran low through smoke, hit Peter in the chest with his head, seized his sleeve and pulled. Peter was dazed and half-deaf. He thought the dog was dragging him the wrong way. He fought him. Atlas bit his sleeve harder, not flesh, fabric, and hauled him toward the left line Ben had trusted. Monroe followed by crawling with one ruined leg. Ben moved back for Sykes. Peter saw him through dust, one arm under the wounded man's shoulders. He saw Ben turn once toward Atlas. The dog tried to go back. Ben gave the hand signal again. Back. Good boy. Go. Peter stopped. His breathing had changed. Rachel waited. Mark said nothing through the phone. Claire looked down at her hands. Matt stared at the table as if the grain of the wood might hold him upright. Peter forced the last part out. The second blast came after Atlas reached us. Smaller. Closer to Ben. I do not have a clean picture after that. Just sound dropping out and coming back wrong. Atlas tried to go forward again. I held his collar so hard my fingers cramped for days. He fought me. Not to attack. To return. Peter looked at Matt. Your son did not lose control of that dog. He gave him the only order that could save the rest of us. The room seemed to tilt. For 7 years, official words had placed a stain around Ben's name. Delay, confusion, excessive trust in canine response. Those words had slipped into Matt's grief like poison in rainwater. Now Peter's account did not make Ben less dead. It made him visible. That hurt differently. Rachel ended the recording with the careful phrase Mark requested, then placed the device aside. Peter opened the metal tin and unfolded his notes. They were written in a rough hand across hospital forms envelopes and the backs of medication sheets. Dates, times, names, fragments. The green route was wrong. Ben called the dog response twice. Atlas found left line. Contractor liaison visited after surgery. Do not complicate families. Do not endanger benefits. Non-adoptable classification came later. Matt read each line as if it had been carved into him. Peter's shame was there too, but shame was not proof. The notes were. Rachel photographed every page. Mark asked for originals in a sealed envelope. Linda said she would witness the transfer. Matt almost laughed. His kitchen had become a courthouse after all. Atlas leaned against his leg. Matt looked down. The dog was tired beyond hiding it. His bad leg trembled. His eyes remained open. "You can lie down," Matt said. Atlas did not. Peter spoke again. "There is one more thing." No one moved. Peter looked at Claire first. "I remembered the dog was brought stateside before I was discharged. I saw him once more at the kennel. He was not aggressive. He was quiet. He had stopped eating. They said grief made him dangerous." Claire's face hardened. "That is convenient language." Peter nodded. "I sewed the tag into the harness because I thought if anyone found him later, maybe someone would know." Matt's voice was rough. "But you never told me." "No." Peter met his eyes. "I let a hidden tag do what I was too afraid to do." The honesty was not enough. It was something. Matt stood slowly because the body had rules now. Atlas stood with him. Matt wanted to speak a judgment that would settle the room. Nothing came that did not sound too small. Claire crossed to her brother and took the notes from his shaking hand. She did not hug him. She did not forgive him. She held the papers gently, and Peter's shoulders folded as if that alone was more kindness than he expected. Later, after everyone left, Matt carried Ben's photograph to the shelf above the kitchen table. He placed the broken tag beside it. Atlas watched. The old dog looked from the tag to the photograph, then to Matt. Maybe he understood. Maybe he only felt the change in the room. Maybe those were not so different. Matt lowered himself to one knee with difficulty. Atlas stepped close. "Ben trusted you," Matt whispered. Atlas pressed his scarred head against Matt's chest. For the first time, Matt did not flinch from the tenderness. Then Rachel's phone rang on the table. She had forgotten it under a folder and returned for it just as the screen lit up. She read the message and went pale. Mark had sent a recovered fragment from the audio file. One line had come through the damage. "Atlas back. Take them back." Matt heard the words in Rachel's shaking voice and felt the whole dark house listen. The morning after the audio fragment arrived, Port Angeles woke beneath a clean, cold sky, the kind that made the harbor look carved from tin and glass. Frost whitened the grass around Matt Callahan's house, and the cedars stood black and still as if the whole peninsula had decided to hold its breath. Matt had not slept. He had sat at the kitchen table long after Rachel left, replaying the recovered words in his mind until they no longer sounded like audio. They sounded like a hand on a door from the other side. "Atlas back. Take them back." Ben's voice had not been clear enough for comfort. It was thin, torn by static, swallowed at the edges. But it was Ben. Matt knew that with a certainty that did not ask for legal permission. Atlas had known too. When Rachel played the fragment on her phone, the old shepherd had risen from the doorway and walked to the table. He had not barked or whined. He had sat before the little speaker, ears forward, eyes fixed, body held in a working posture so precise it made Claire cover her mouth. Then when Ben's voice said, "Good boy," through the damaged second clip Mark had managed to pull, Atlas lowered his head to the floor. Not in fear, in obedience, remembered across 7 years. That image stayed with Matt until dawn.
After coffee he was not supposed to drink, and toast Atlas forced him to eat by standing in front of the mug, Matt went to the shed. The small building smelled of cedar dust, marine oil, and rain trapped in old rope. It was the one place he had once let Ben help him fix things. A bicycle chain, a broken oar, a hinge on the crab pot rack, a green tackle box that Ben had painted himself one summer and declared waterproof against both rain and adult criticism. Matt had not thought about that tackle box in years. Now the memory came as if Atlas had nosed it out from under the floorboards. He found it beneath a canvas tarp, behind paint cans and a coil of rope. The green paint had chipped.
Ben's initials, BC, were scratched into the lid with a pocket knife. Atlas stood beside the workbench, nose lifted. Matt set the box beneath the yellow lamp. For several seconds he could not open it. The latch was simple. The hand was not. "Stop looking at me," Matt told Atlas. The dog looked harder. "Fine." The latch clicked. Inside were old fishing lures, rusted hooks, a compass, a faded photo of Ben holding a trout with both hands, and a roll of electrical tape gone stiff with age. At the bottom, beneath a tray that did not lift easily, Matt found the hidden compartment. Ben had built those into everything at 16. Classified candy, he had called it. Matt slid his pocket knife under the panel and pried gently. The bottom lifted. Inside lay a small notebook wrapped in a plastic freezer bag. The paper had yellowed at the edges. Ben's handwriting filled the first page, quick, slanted, alive. Matt sat down on the stool before his knees made the decision for him. Atlas rested his chin on the edge of the workbench. The notebook began with training notes. Atlas alerts harder in crosswind if dust carries fertilizer trace. Do not correct too fast. Let him work the air. Atlas hates orange ear protection. Atlas stole Corporal Hayes's glove and showed zero regret. Matt huffed a sound that was almost laughter. It startled him. There were pages of scent logs, weather notes, gear failures, and small pieces of Ben's voice. He wrote about Atlas refusing bad water, about a rookie trying to bribe him with jerky, about the dog sleeping across the tent entrance through a sandstorm. Then the entries changed. North Star overlay cleared Route Sparrow. Atlas gave pressure response twice. Training lane later confirmed buried plate. Filed discrepancy. No follow-up. Another page. Sensor map shows clean in dry wash. Atlas pulled left. Found wire sign after manual check. North Star Tech said dog was reacting to old explosive scent. I do not like that answer. Matt's breath grew thin. The notebook was not a prophecy. It was a record of a professional handler noticing a system fail in small ways before a big failure killed someone. Near the back, one line had been underlined twice. If they ever say I trusted the dog too much, remember this. Sometimes a dog is the only one not lying to protect a contract. Matt read it once, then again. The words blurred. Atlas nudged his wrist. Matt lowered his hand onto the dog's head. Your boy knew, he whispered. Atlas leaned into him. For the first time since Ben died, the pain did not only say he is gone. It said something crueler and kinder. You did not know him fully. Now, too late and by grace, you are being given a chance to learn. Rachel arrived within the hour, followed by Claire and then Linda. Mark joined by video call on Rachel's laptop, his face framed by a Seattle office full of books and rain-streaked glass. Nobody made jokes when Matt laid the notebook on the table. Even Linda took off her hat. Rachel photographed each page before anyone touched it further. Mark read the underlined sentence and went very still. This matters, he said. Matt looked at the screen. It proves North Star failed. No, not alone, nothing alone. But it shows Ben had documented concerns about the sensor system before the final mission. It supports Peter's testimony. It gives motive for someone to prefer the handler error narrative over a contractor failure narrative.
Rachel added, "and it matches the dog response described in the notes." Claire nodded. "And my report shows Atlas is not some unstable animal invented by grief." Linda looked at Matt. "You have layers now." Matt's mouth tightened. "Layers do not bring him back." "No," Mark said gently. "But sometimes they stop a lie from living rent-free on a dead man's name." That afternoon, Claire drove back to Forks to see Peter. Matt did not ask her to. She went because the notebook had changed something for her, too.
Peter opened his door wearing the same knit cap and a face full of sleeplessness.
Claire held up a paper bag from the diner. "Soup," she said. He looked at it like it was a legal summons. "I do not deserve soup. No one deserves Nora's soup. It is mostly garlic and opinion." Peter almost smiled. That almost was enough for her to step inside. The trailer looked no better in daylight. The photographs still lay face down. Claire set the soup on the table and turned one picture upright. Peter flinched. She did not apologize. They sat across from each other while rain began again outside. He told her more about the hospital visit, the pressure, the shame that grew teeth after discharge. She told him he had hurt people by staying silent. He said he knew. She said knowing was not the same as repair. He said he knew that too. They drank bad coffee and ate soup too salty to be medicine. When Claire left, she did not hug him, but she turned the second photograph upright before she walked out.
Back in Port Angeles, Rachel's inbox filled with responses. Some were automatic denials. Some were acknowledgments. One came from a contact in a congressional district office who wanted a summary. Mark prepared a formal packet. Linda quietly checked whether North Star had any local representatives, security contractors, or legal contacts near the peninsula. Matt watched all of this with the uneasy feeling that his kitchen had grown too small for the truth it now contained. Atlas slept beneath the table with his head on Ben's old glove. He had begun eating better. His ribs no longer looked like fence slats beneath his coat. His limp remained, especially in damp weather, but the old dog had gained something like presence. Not youth. No one gets youth back because paperwork turns up. But strength. Enough to keep standing. 2 evenings later, Mark called while Matt was cleaning the stew pot and pretending not to enjoy the smell of actual food. Rachel had bullied him into cooking. Atlas had approved by drooling on the floor with military commitment. Matt answered on speaker. Mark's voice was calm, which Matt had learned meant trouble had put on a tie. "North Star knows," Mark said. Matt looked toward the shelf where Ben's photograph stood beside the broken tag. "Knows what?" "Enough. Their counsel received a records preservation notice through one of the channels. Also, someone from North Star Tactical Analytics requested information from a local office about a dog matching Atlas's description." Rachel, who had stopped by with new forms and no sense of personal boundaries, looked up sharply. Mark continued. "Victor Kane is coming to Port Angeles." Matt dried his hands slowly. "Who is Victor Kane?" "Executive Director, public face of North Star's Field Analytics Division, former defense liaison. Very polished, very careful, very used to rooms believing him." Atlas stood under the table. The hair along his shoulders rose. Matt saw it. So did Rachel. Mark said, "Do not meet him alone." Matt looked at Atlas. The dog stared toward the dark front window as if a scent had arrived before the man. Outside, the porch light remained dead above the steps, but the glass reflected Matt, Rachel, Atlas, and the photograph of Ben on the shelf. For the first time, the house did not look empty. It looked occupied. And something was coming to knock. The day Victor Kane arrived in Port Angeles, the sky cleared into a brittle blue that made every wet roof shine too brightly. Cold sunlight lay across the harbor, and the ferries moved over the strait like white pages being turned by an unseen hand. Matt Callahan saw the man first through the window of Olympic Diner. He was hard to miss. Port Angeles had rain jackets, work boots, fleece vests, and men who measured formal clothing by whether it had been worn to a funeral. Victor Kane wore a charcoal overcoat that had never brushed against fish crates, polished black shoes, and a navy scarf arranged with careless money. His gray hair was combed back with expensive precision. A small American flag pin rested on his lapel. On his right hand, a silver ring caught the light whenever he moved his fingers. Two men followed him. Not quite security, not quite assistance. The kind of men trained to look unimportant until a room became useful. Nora Finch, who owned the diner and distrusted polished shoes on principle, watched them enter with a coffee pot in one hand. "Well," she said softly, "somebody ordered a weather system in a coat." Matt sat in the back booth with Atlas beneath the table, Rachel Evans across from him, and Sheriff Linda Barrett at the counter pretending she had arrived for pie. Nobody believed that. Atlas had been uneasy since morning. He had eaten, taken his pills hidden in turkey, and then planted himself by the front window of Matt's house until Rachel arrived. At the diner, he lay facing the door, head low, torn ear angled forward. When Kane entered, Atlas stood. No growl, no bark. Just a shift from old dog to working dog so quick it made Rachel's pen stop. Kane's eyes found him. For half a second, the practiced warmth left the man's face. Recognition passed there, wrapped instantly in calculation. Matt saw it. Rachel saw it too. Linda turned on her stool. Kane smiled before the silence could name him.
"Mr. Callahan, I believe."
Matt did not stand. "Depends who is asking. Victor Kane, North Star Tactical Analytics." His voice was warm, smooth, and measured. The voice of a man who had said "unfortunate outcome" in rooms where other people had said "dead." "I hoped we might speak privately." Nora arrived with a coffee pot. "No private booths today. Health department." Matt looked at her. "That is not a thing." "It is now." Kane's smile did not move. "Public is fine. I only wanted to express respect for your son's service and concern that old operational matters may be causing unnecessary distress." Rachel set down her fork. That sentence came with its own fog machine. Kane looked at her. "And you are Rachel Evans, veteran support." Kane inclined his head. "Of course. I understand grief can create a hunger for certainty." Matt's hand tightened beneath the table. Atlas pressed against his knee. Kane continued. "A beloved son, a damaged animal. Incomplete records from sensitive operations.
It is natural to reach for a story that gives pain a cleaner shape."
Linda slid off the counter stool. "Careful, Mr. Kane." He turned toward her. "Sheriff Linda Barrett." Kane smiled. "I mean no disrespect." "Then improve the aim." Nora made a sound that might have been a cough if anyone had been willing to lie for her. Kane's eyes returned to Atlas. "There are also safety concerns. An elderly military animal with an uncertain behavioral history can be unpredictable." Atlas stood fully now. Matt felt the leash in his hand, felt the tremor in the old dog's body. Not fear, memory. Rachel's voice stayed even. "Dr. Monroe's report describes him as injured, neglected, trained, and stable. That is one professional view. It is the one based on touching the dog instead of touching liability." Kane's thumb moved over his ring. There it was again, the small crack. Matt noticed and filed it in the same cold place where he kept the location of exits. Kane leaned slightly closer. "Mr. Callahan,
I am asking you not to be used by people who may profit from reopening wounds.
Media lawyers, activists, agencies with budgets to justify. Pain draws company. Not all of it is kind. Matt looked at him for a long moment. "You done?" Kane's smile thinned. "For now." "Then listen carefully." Matt's voice stayed low enough that the nearby booths went quiet. "You do not get to call my son old operational matter. You do not get to call his dog damaged like you are describing equipment on a loss sheet. And you do not get to stand in a diner smelling like dry cleaning and tell me grief invented what your records cannot explain." Atlas leaned against his leg. Kane's eyes hardened. "The animal may still be subject to custody issues if its transfer history is irregular." Linda stepped closer. "Custody issues can come through my office with paperwork, not through a diner ambush." Kane looked at her badge, then at Matt. "I would hate for this to become adversarial." Nora poured coffee into a mug nobody had ordered. "That ship made noise leaving the dock, honey." Rachel covered a smile with her napkin. Kane straightened. "Then we will speak in the appropriate setting." Rachel opened her folder. "Good. American Legion Hall, Friday evening. Public information meeting. Legal counsel, local press, veterans representatives, and a congressional staff contact have been invited." Kane's ring flashed once more. "That seems premature." So did calling a living dog unstable without reading the full file. Matt looked down at Atlas, whose amber eyes never left Kane. Kane gave a polite nod, the kind men use when leaving a room they intend to own later. Until Friday. He left with his 2 men behind him, the bell over the diner door jingling too cheerfully for the damage done. Conversation returned slowly after he stepped outside. Nobody looked directly at Matt at first. Then an old fisherman near the counter lifted his mug. "For Ben," he said. The words moved through the room gently. Not applause, not performance. Something better. Space. Matt looked away. Atlas lowered himself under the table again, but his body stayed tight. That night at Matt's house, the kitchen filled with preparation. Rachel sorted evidence packets. Mark spoke from the laptop, reminding everyone what the evidence did prove and what it did not yet prove. Claire arrived from Squim with her report revised into clean medical language and an expression that suggested she would rather wrestle a goat than attend a public meeting. Linda brought extra copies of local ordinances because she said men like Kane enjoyed pretending small towns had no rules. Matt stood at the sink, washing one mug for too long. Atlas watched him. "You are staring," Matt said. The dog did not stop. Claire looked over. "He is monitoring your breathing, so is everyone else. Your breathing is noisy. It is air. Try being less dramatic with it." Rachel did not look up from her papers. "Eat something." Matt pointed at her. "Do not coordinate with the dog." Atlas thumped his tail once. The humor did not remove the pressure in the room. It made it bearable. Peter Lowell arrived after dark. He stood on the porch for nearly a minute before knocking. When Matt opened the door, Peter held the scorched challenge coin in one hand and his written statement in the other. "I almost turned around 3 times, Peter said. Matt stepped aside. "But you did not." "No." Atlas came to the doorway and sniffed Peter's sleeve. Peter looked down. "Hey, old boy." Atlas gave him one slow blink. Peter swallowed hard. Claire watched from the table. For a moment neither sibling moved. Then she pulled out the chair beside her with her boot. "Sit down before you drip on the evidence." Peter sat. It was not forgiveness. It was a bridge plank. Late that night, Mark called again. His voice carried the careful energy of a man who had found something sharp. Audio restoration improved 2 more seconds. Rachel put him on speaker. Everyone went still. Mark played the file. Static filled the kitchen. Wind. A burst of broken voices.
Then a young man's voice, thin through damage but alive enough to wound. Atlas. Back. The room stopped breathing. The file crackled. Take them back. Atlas rose from the floor. He moved to the phone on the table. His old body trembled. The audio broke again, then one last fragment came through. Good boy. Go. Atlas sat. Perfect posture, ears forward, eyes fixed on the phone. No one spoke. Matt gripped the counter with both hands. Peter covered his face. Claire looked at the floor, jaw tight. Rachel's eyes shone, but her voice stayed steady. Friday, she said. Matt looked at Atlas, sitting before the dead sound of Ben's voice. Friday, he said. Outside, the porch light remained dark, but beyond the window the town lights glimmered through the rain like witnesses gathering. Friday evening came to Port Angeles with rain on every roof and wind combing the harbor into dark, restless lines. The American Legion Hall sat 2 blocks from the water, a low brick building with a tin roof, a flagpole, and windows that glowed warm against the wet street. Inside, folding chairs filled faster than Rachel Evans had expected. Old veterans came in ball caps and rain jackets. Young families came with children who were told to whisper and mostly failed. Fishermen stood along the back wall, smelling faintly of salt and diesel. Nora Finch from the diner occupied the front row with her arms crossed and a purse large enough to contain snacks, tissues, and possibly legal advice. Sheriff Linda Barrett stood near the side door in uniform, hat low, hands folded over her belt. She was not there to speak. She was there to make sure nobody confused public concern with permission to behave badly. Matt Callahan sat near the front with Atlas at his left side. He wore his charcoal wax jacket, dark jeans, and boots cleaned by rain more than effort. His face looked carved from weather. Only the hand resting lightly on Atlas's collar betrayed him. The old German shepherd sat upright, sable coat brushed white crescent bright against his chest, torn ear angled toward the room. His injured leg was tucked carefully beneath him. He looked tired. He looked old. He also looked like no one in that room could move without his permission. Rachel stood at a folding table where evidence packets were arranged in clean rows. Beside her, Mark Reynolds had come from Seattle, wearing a plain dark suit and carrying no drama at all. He looked like a man who could make a date mismatch feel nervous. Claire Monroe sat near the aisle with a folder in her lap, face composed, hair pinned badly enough to prove the day had fought her. Peter Lowell sat beside her. He wore a borrowed gray coat, and his hand stayed wrapped around the scorched challenge coin until his knuckles paled. Every few minutes, he glanced at the exit. Every time Claire placed one boot slightly in his way. It was not tender. It worked. Victor Kane arrived 5 minutes late. Of course he did. Men like Kane understood the theater of being waited for. His charcoal coat shed rain in perfect beads, and the 2 men with him took positions near the back without being told. Kane smiled at the room with practiced regret. Atlas stood. The change moved through the hall faster than speech. Conversation thinned. Kane's eyes touched the dog, then Matt, then Mark. His smile held, but not as comfortably. Linda pushed away from the wall. "Evening," she said. Kane nodded. "Sheriff, meeting is open. Trouble is not. I would not dream of bringing any." Linda looked at the 2 men behind him. "Dreams improve with supervision." Nora coughed into her hand. It sounded suspiciously like approval. Rachel opened the meeting before the room could turn restless. Her voice was steady, not loud, but it carried. "We are here because a German shepherd was found starving near our harbor," she said. "Because evidence suggests he may be a former military working dog named Atlas. because that dog appears connected to Sergeant Benjamin Callahan's final mission, and because questions involving veterans' working dogs, contractors, and official reports deserve more than rumor. She looked around the room. This is not a court. No one is being convicted here. But truth often has to stand up in a room before it ever reaches a judge. Mark spoke next. He did not perform. He built, page by page, date by date. The broken tag fragment found sewn inside Atlas's old harness, the photograph of Ben Callahan with the same dog, Dr. Claire Monroe's veterinary findings showing advanced training harness wear, bite equipment wear, medical neglect, and stable behavior.
The microchip scan with a service-linked entry and an incomplete later civilian registry. Peter Lowell's contemporaneous notes. Ben's training notebook documenting repeated discrepancies between Atlas's alerts and North Star route overlays. The damaged audio fragment. The public contract records placing North Star tactical analytics in the orbit of field sensor systems and K-9 reassessment support during the relevant period. Mark repeated often what the evidence did not yet prove. That made what it did suggest harder to dismiss. Kane waited until Mark finished. Then he stood. He did not hurry. The room saw patience and polish. Matt saw a man choosing where to place the knife. Kane's voice was warm. Let me begin by saying Sergeant Callahan's service deserves respect. Matt did not move. Atlas sat again, ears forward. Kane continued. War is complex. Operational records are often incomplete to protect families, units, and national security. Grief can create understandable patterns where the record remains necessarily limited. A beloved son, a damaged dog, a community that wants justice. I sympathize with all of that. His eyes touched Matt. But sympathy is not evidence. Claire stood. The movement was so quick, Peter flinched. Damaged dog Kane turned with gentle politeness. Dr. Monroe, I believe. Veterinarian, Claire said. And former Navy nurse. Then you understand trauma can alter animal behavior. I understand trauma better than most people who invoice around it. A murmur moved through the hall. Claire opened her folder. Atlas is not unstable. He is injured, underfed, trained, and old. There is a difference. She summarized her findings without softness. Harness scars, tooth wear, response discipline, non-aggressive stress behavior, medical neglect. Kane's thumb passed over his silver ring. Matt watched it. There, a crack. Then Peter stood. No one had called him yet. He stood because if he waited, courage might leave by the side door. Claire's hand moved toward his sleeve, then stopped. Peter looked at Matt first, then Atlas, then the room. My name is Peter Lowell, he said. I served with Ben Callahan on the mission being discussed. His hearing aid gave a faint whine. He adjusted it with shaking fingers. I signed a statement 7 years ago that did not tell the truth. The hall went so quiet that rain on the roof seemed to grow larger. Peter's testimony did not flow neatly. Truth rarely does when it has been trapped in a man too long. It came in pieces. A route overlay marked green, Atlas pulling left, Ben calling in a pressure response, command ordering movement. The first blast, Sykes down, Monroe bleeding. Ben sending Atlas back with the command to take them out. He knew the way, Peter said. His voice broke. Atlas knew the way, and Ben trusted him. Kane stood halfway. This is an emotional recollection from a man who has admitted to an unreliable prior statement. Linda's voice cut across the room. Sit down until he is done. Kane looked toward the sheriff. Linda did not blink. Kane sat. Peter finished with his head bowed. I was hurt and scared. Men with cleaner uniforms and better words told me silence was honorable. It was not. It was just silence.
He placed the scorched challenge coin on the table. I owe Ben Callahan my life. I owed his father the truth. I am late, but I am here. Matt felt the words enter somewhere too deep for response. Rachel nodded to Mark. The audio had been stabilized as much as possible and copied for preservation. Mark warned the room that it was incomplete, damaged, and not a movie scene. Reality rarely provided those. Rachel pressed play. Static filled the hall. Wind, broken voices, a burst of interference. Then a young man's voice came through, thin as light under a locked door. Atlas. Back. Atlas stood. Matt's hand tightened on the leash, then loosened at once. The shepherd stepped forward slowly.
Old pause, soundless on the hall floor. The recording hissed. Take them back. Atlas moved toward the speaker on the table. Every eye followed him. The file crackled again. Good boy. Go. Atlas stopped before the speaker and sat. Not because anyone commanded him now. Because a command had crossed 7 years of darkness and found the place in him where loyalty still waited. He did not howl. He did not paw at the machine. He simply sat in perfect working posture, ears forward, amber eyes fixed on the little black speaker as if the sun had risen inside it. The room broke without much sound. Nora pressed a napkin to her mouth. Linda looked down. Claire's jaw tightened until it trembled. Peter covered his face. At the back of the hall, Victor Kane stood very still. For the first time all night, he did not look polished. He looked recognized. Matt saw it. So did Mark. And Atlas, still sitting before Ben's voice, turned his head and looked straight at Kane. Rain hammered the roof of the American Legion Hall hard enough to make the fluorescent lights seem smaller. Inside, no one moved for several seconds after Atlas turned toward Victor Kane. The old German shepherd sat near the speaker, his sable coat shining under the harsh lights, his torn ear lifted, his amber eyes fixed on the man from North Star Tactical Analytics. Kane recovered first. Men like him always did. He smoothed his coat with one hand and let his face settle back into concern. With respect, he said, "This proves only that an elderly animal responded to familiar audio. It does not establish contractor liability, operational fault, or intentional misconduct." Mark Reynolds stepped forward. "No," he said calmly. "It establishes that the official behavioral description of Atlas is questionable. It supports Mr. Lowell's testimony. It aligns with Sergeant Callahan's training notebook. It conflicts with the transfer classification your company benefited from, and it raises enough concern for appropriate agencies to reopen the matter formally." Kane's thumb rubbed his silver ring. Rachel noticed. Matt noticed. Atlas noticed the man more than the ring. Kane looked toward the crowd, choosing his audience. "I am concerned that grief is being directed toward a company that provided tools in good faith under difficult circumstances." "Tools fail," Linda said from the wall. "Good faith admits it." A few people murmured. Kane did not look at her. The animal itself may still be connected to unresolved government or contractor property records. For his safety and proper evaluation, he should be surrendered to qualified custody until the record is clarified. The hall went cold. Matt stood. He did not stand fast. His heart medication and the eyes of 3 women in the room had taught him better than that. But when he reached his full height, the old SEAL was suddenly visible beneath the weathered jacket and gray hair. Not theatrical, present. "You will not touch my dog." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Callahan, you are emotional." "No," Matt's voice did not rise. "I was emotional 7 years ago when polite men buried my son under fog because I had no proof and too much grief. Tonight, I am informed." Atlas left the speaker and returned to Matt's side. The shepherd leaned lightly against his leg. Rachel lifted a folder.
Copies of all materials presented tonight have been sent to legal counsel, the congressional office represented here, and relevant investigative contacts. The young staffer near the aisle looked startled to be mentioned, then sat straighter. Rachel continued, "No animal is being surrendered to a private contractor whose records are part of the question." Mark added, "Any custody claim can arrive through proper legal channels." Linda stepped forward. "And through my office, if it arrives in this county." Kane looked from one face to another. He had entered a room of wounded people, expecting loose emotion. He had found structure. That bothered him more than anger. Structure could move. The two men at the back shifted. Linda saw it. "Do not," she said. They stopped. Nora Finch whispered "Amen" from the front row and did not pretend otherwise. Kane adjusted his scarf. "I hope you all understand the potential harm of irresponsible accusations." Claire rose again. "Irresponsible is labeling a grieving working dog unstable so he can disappear into a transfer chain." Peter, still shaking, stood beside her. "Irresponsible is signing a statement because fear sounds like orders when you are 20-something and hurt." He looked at Matt. "I did that. I am done doing it." Kane's face smoothed too quickly. That was the tell. The meeting did not end with applause. Applause would have been too easy, too clean, too much like a story people could leave behind in the parking lot. It ended with people standing slowly, as if unsure how to carry the weight now placed in their hands. Some came to Matt and said they were sorry. Some could not speak. Some looked at Atlas first. The old dog accepted attention only after checking Matt's breathing. He was tired. Even loyalty had bones. Peter remained near the folding table, both hands on the back of a chair. Claire stood a few feet away, close enough that he was not alone, far enough that the years between them still had room. Matt found him there after most of the crowd had begun to leave. Rain clattered against the high windows. Peter looked smaller now. "I should have done it sooner," he said. "Yes," Matt answered. Peter accepted the word. "I do not know how to live with what I signed." Matt looked toward Atlas, who had returned to his side and leaned against his leg. "Ben saved you." Peter's mouth trembled. "He did." "Then do not spend the rest of his gift dying slowly." Peter looked up. Matt's voice stayed rough, but not cruel. "Live in a way that makes his choice less lonely." Peter nodded once and covered his face. Claire moved then. She placed one hand on the back of his coat. It was not a full embrace. It was enough to keep him standing. Outside, under the awning, rain fell in silver ropes from the roof. The harbor lights blurred beyond the street. Linda came to stand beside Matt while Atlas sniffed wet hair. For a long moment, neither old friend spoke. Then Linda said, "I was wrong to tell you not to dig." Matt watched rain run along the curb. "You were afraid I would fall in." "I was." "This was not a grave," he said. "It was a door." Linda nodded. Behind them, Rachel was already speaking with Mark and the congressional staffer. Claire was checking Atlas's bad leg with a towel from the hall kitchen. Peter sat on the front step with the challenge coin in his palm, no longer hiding it. Kane left without another public word. His car pulled away through the rain, taillights fading red on the wet street. No one had won. Not yet. But the lie had been forced under light, and it looked smaller there. The days that followed did not bring thunder. They brought email, certified letters, requests for statements, records preservation notices. A reporter from the Olympic Peninsula Daily News who had sharp eyes, silver hair, and enough sense not to call pain a scoop while standing in Matt's kitchen. Her article did not shout. That was why it struck hard. She wrote about a dog found starving by the harbor, about altered or incomplete transfer records,
about a contractor's role in field route analytics and post-deployment canine reassessment, about a dead handler whose official narrative no longer matched the evidence. She did not call Ben a hero in the headline. She let the facts make that accusation against the lie. Within weeks, North Star Tactical Analytics came under formal review. Then came subpoenas, suspended contract discussions, audit notices, and statements so carefully worded they nearly required a translator. Victor Kane did not vanish in handcuffs while lightning split the sky. Matt would have found that efficient. Instead, his world began to bleed from paper cuts. Missing chain of custody documents, inconsistent K9 behavioral classifications, suppressed discrepancy notes, field sensor performance reports that looked less reliable in dirt than they had in presentations. Rachel called it slow accountability. Mark called it preliminary. Linda called it better than punching him. "I never punched him," Matt said. Linda sat at his kitchen table drinking coffee she pretended not to like. "That is why I said better." Atlas lay beneath the table with his head on Linda's boot. "Your dog likes law enforcement," Linda said. "He likes boots. He has standards. He ate half a dish sponge last week. Complicated standards." The joke landed gently because the house had changed enough to hold it. Ben's photograph stayed on the shelf. The tag fragment rested beside it in a small wooden dish. Atlas's old harness hung cleaned and folded near the door, no longer hidden, no longer trash. Peter came by twice, then 3 times. The first visits were awkward enough to make furniture uncomfortable. He fixed a loose gutter. He brought copies of medical records Mark requested. He stood in the yard with Matt and said little. Claire came sometimes with him, sometimes separately. The siblings did not become healed because one public night had forced truth into language. Healing did not obey meeting schedules. But Claire stopped turning away when Peter said her name. Peter stopped apologizing as a substitute for repair and began showing up with tools. That mattered more. In early April, an official envelope arrived in Matt's mailbox. It was thick, cream-colored, and heavy enough to feel dangerous. He stood beside the gravel lane with the envelope in his hand while the straight wind moved through the cedars. Atlas sat beside him. For all Matt had faced in his life, paper still had the power to make his hands unsteady. Inside the kitchen, Rachel happened to arrive with groceries she claimed were not surveillance. Claire followed with joint supplements for Atlas. Peter came 10 minutes later carrying a small toolbox because the back step had a wobble and he had apparently chosen carpentry as penance. Linda stopped by because, in her words, coincidence had a badge. They found Matt still standing with the envelope on the table. No one joked. Atlas pushed his muzzle under Matt's hand. The gesture was familiar now, not less powerful for being familiar. Matt opened the envelope. He read the first page, then the second. Then he sat down hard in the chair. Rachel's hand went to her mouth. Claire went still. Peter looked at the floor as if afraid to hope upward. Matt read one sentence again, moving his lips slightly, as if words had to become physical before he could believe them. The official record concerning Sergeant Benjamin Callahan's final actions has been amended to reflect conduct consistent with selfless service, sound judgment under hazardous conditions, and actions directly contributing to the survival of fellow personnel. Matt placed the paper on the table. For 7 years, he had imagined truth would arrive with a sound big enough to crack the sky. A shout, a curse, a sob that would shake the dead loose from memory. Instead, there was only the refrigerator hum, rain ticking at the window, and an old dog breathing beside his knee. Atlas rested his chin on Matt's leg. Matt closed his hand over the scarred head. "He did it right," Matt said. Peter began to cry. Claire took his hand this time. Rachel looked away to give them all a little mercy.
Linda stood by the door, eyes bright and jaw set. Matt looked at Ben's photograph. "He did it right," he said again. And this time the house believed him.
Spring came to Port Angeles shyly, as if the peninsula did not want to admit it had survived another winter. The mornings were still cold, but the cold had softened at the edges. Wildflowers opened along the road ditches. The harbor smelled less of iron rain and more of sun on rope-wet cedar and boats being made ready for better weather. At Matt Callahan's house, the fence still leaned in two places. The back step still complained unless a man placed his foot just right. The porch light still had not been turned on. Not yet. But the bulb had been replaced. Peter Lowell had done it without asking, standing on a ladder while Matt held the base and pretended this did not count as trust. Atlas supervised from the yard with the grave concern of a foreman who had seen contractors fail civilization before. When Peter climbed down, the old German shepherd sniffed the tool pouch and sneezed. Peter looked offended. "It is a perfectly good pouch." Matt said he has standards. Peter pointed toward the flower bed where Atlas had recently buried one of Matt's socks. "Flexible standards." The laugh that came from Matt startled all three of them. It was not loud. It was not long. It was unforced. That made it feel almost dangerous. Peter smiled, then looked down, unsure if he had earned the right to share it. Matt did not make the moment heavier by naming it. He handed Peter another screw. The memorial was held 3 weeks after the amended record arrived. No parade, no polished spectacle. Ben would have hated that Matt thought, though he had learned to be careful about thinking he knew everything his son would have felt. Fathers invented their children in pieces, then spent the rest of life discovering the real person had been standing just outside the frame. The ceremony took place at Veterans Memorial Park near the water, where flags snapped in the spring wind and gulls cried over the marina. Folding chairs stood in careful rows on damp grass. Mason jars of wildflowers lined the front because Nora Finch had bullied 3 fishermen and 1 city clerk into helping. Rachel arrived early with folders, tissues, and a face that dared anyone to call either one unnecessary. Mark Reynolds came from Seattle, briefcase in hand, though no one needed legal argument that day. Linda stood near the aisle in dress uniform, hat tucked beneath one arm. Claire came with Peter. They did not arrive holding hands, but when they reached the chairs, she did not sit far from him. That was a language, too. Peter carried the scorched challenge coin in both hands. He had cleaned it, but the burn mark remained. Some things should. Atlas walked at Matt's left side. The old dog had gained weight and dignity in almost equal measure. His sable coat shone where it was not scarred. The white crescent on his chest flashed in the sunlight. His bad leg still stiffened in damp weather, and his appetite had become a matter of county concern. He sat beside Matt without being told. At the front stood a new marker beside the names of local service members. Sergeant Benjamin Callahan, Army K-9 Handler, Selfless Service. Beneath it, smaller, at Matt's request, were the words, K-9 Partner Atlas. He brought them home. When Matt first saw the line, something inside him gave way without breaking. It was possible he discovered from mercy to hurt. The chaplain spoke briefly. Mark spoke briefly too, explaining that records mattered because records shaped memory, and memory shaped how the living carried the dead. Rachel spoke even less. She said some truths came home through official channels, and some came home hungry, limping, and still loyal. Then Matt was asked to speak. He had written nothing. The younger version of himself would have called that poor preparation. The man standing there with Atlas beside him knew some things died if they were over-prepared. He stepped to the marker and placed one hand on the stone. The wind moved through the flags. My son believed a dog could tell the truth before a man admitted it, Matt said. No one shifted. Atlas leaned lightly against his leg. I thought that made him soft, Matt paused. The sentence cost him. I was wrong. The words did not fix the past. They did not open a grave. They did not place Ben back at the kitchen table with wet boots and too much energy and stories Matt had pretended not to enjoy. But they were true. That mattered. Ben trusted what God put in front of him, Matt continued. A dog with a good nose. A warning other people missed. A chance to save someone even when he could not save himself. Matt looked toward Peter. Peter's face was wet, and he did not hide it. Atlas knew the way out. Ben knew Atlas. Took me 7 years to catch up. That was all. He stepped back. After the ceremony, people moved slowly as if nobody wanted to be the first to turn the day ordinary again. Nora slipped Atlas a piece of plain biscuit when Claire was not looking. Claire absolutely saw it and chose mercy over prosecution. Linda accused Nora of corrupting a service animal. Nora said the animal had better discipline than half the county council. Matt almost laughed again. This time it did not frighten him. Peter approached the marker last. He held the challenge coin like an offering too heavy for one hand. I used to leave it where nobody could see me, he told Matt. I know. I was ashamed to stand here. Matt looked at him for a long time. Peter's mouth trembled. I am not asking you to make it easy. Good, Matt said. That means you understand. Peter nodded and placed the coin at the base of Ben's marker where everyone could see it. Claire stepped beside him and after a moment took his hand. Not forgiveness completed. Forgiveness beginning its work clothes. By late afternoon, Matt and Atlas returned home. The house at the end of the gravel lane was still old. The fence still leaned. The porch board still needed sanding. Grief had not transformed the place into something shining. Healing, Matt was learning, was less like rebuilding a cathedral, and more like repairing one board at a time so the rain stopped falling on the living. Inside, he cooked. Not soup from a can, not toast pretending to be supper. Real food. Beef stew simmered on the stove with carrots, potatoes, and enough pepper to make Rachel sigh from 3 miles away if she knew. Atlas stationed himself exactly where dropped food was most likely to occur. You are medically prohibited from onion, Matt said. Atlas stared at the pot. Do not look tragic. Atlas looked more tragic. Disgraceful conduct. When the food was ready, Matt set one plate on the table and a smaller bowl on the floor. Plain beef, potato, and broth cooled carefully. No onion. No seasoning. Claire's voice lived in his head now, issuing veterinary commandments. Atlas sat before the bowl, posture perfect. Drool gathered at one corner of his mouth and fell to the floor. You have the discipline of a marble statue and the plumbing of a broken faucet. Atlas waited. Matt's face softened. Eat. They ate together while evening settled over the strait. Afterward, Matt took Ben's photograph from the shelf, cleaned the glass, and set it back beside the broken tag, the old SEAL coin, and Atlas's new collar tag. Father, son, dog. Not complete. Finally together. Atlas came and stood beside him. Maybe he recognized the photo. Maybe he recognized the stillness. Maybe he simply knew grief had changed shape in the room. Matt lowered himself carefully to one knee. His joints objected. His heart did not. He pressed his forehead gently to Atlas's scarred head. The dog smelled of clean fur, old leather, and stew. I see him now, Matt whispered. Then, even quieter, I see you, too. Atlas leaned into him. Outside, darkness gathered at the edge of the cedars. For 7 years, Matt had let night take the house without argument. Darkness had hidden the empty chair, the closed box, the father he had been after the sun went down. This time, Matt rose and opened the front door. The porch waited. The new bulb sat in the old fixture.
Atlas stepped beside him. Matt reached for the switch. His fingers paused. Then he turned on the light. Gold spilled over the boards, the railing, the repaired step, and the worn flag beside the door. It touched Atlas's sable coat and the white crescent on his chest. It reached the yard where rain had fallen, where a starving dog had crossed into the life of a man who thought he was finished. Matt looked back through the kitchen window at the 2 supper dishes, one plate on the table and one bowl on the floor below it. A small household. A strange family. Enough. Far beyond the trees, the strait rested beneath the first stars. It had seen men leave, men return, lies sink, and faithful things carry truth home over impossible roads.
Matt stood in the warm spill of light with Atlas at his side. The dead had not come back, but love had found another road. For the first time in 7 years, the house outside Port Angeles did not look forgotten. It looked like someone was home. Sometimes healing does not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes tired, hungry, limping, and still faithful enough to knock on the closed door of a wounded heart. Matt did not get his son back, but through Atlas, he received a sacred mercy. He was given the chance to see Ben clearly, to honor him rightly, and to live one more day with the porch light on. That is often how God works in quiet lives. He may not remove every sorrow, but He can send a reason to keep loving through it. If you are carrying an old grief tonight, remember that love does not always return in the way we expect. Sometimes it comes through a neighbor, a truth finally spoken, a hand that stays, or a loyal animal who refuses to let us disappear. If this story touched your heart, comment Amen and share it with someone who needs hope. May peace find your house tonight. May courage sit beside you. May the small light you thought was gone come on again.